Hey dancers, welcome back to Broche Banter. I'm Julie, your host. I'm so happy you're joining us for the powerful conclusion to our three-part series on how to make it as an adult amateur ballet company. This is an inspiring discussion about inclusivity and increasing the visibility and value of amateur dancers in the ballet world. Through wonderful personal stories, each of our guests reveal how they create safe spaces for women to reconnect with their bodies and claim their right to take up space. I hope you enjoy this passionate conversation, and I hope it reminds you that this beautiful art form belongs to everyone who loves it. And with that, I hope you enjoy. Welcome to Broche Banter, everyone. I am so happy to have you all back on the show today. I will go around and introduce everybody, and then we will kick off the fabulous conversation. So we are welcoming back Leigh Purtill from the Leigh Purtill Ballet Company. Welcome back, Leigh.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Today, we also have a remote company member of the Leigh Purtill Ballet Company. We have Ashley joining us here today from Utah.
Yes. Hi. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be part of this conversation.
And today we have both of the co-founders of the Facet Dance Collective. We've got Kelsey joining us again, and we've got Jessica hopping in again for the conversation. So welcome to you both. It's so great to have you.
Excited to be here.
Yes, so excited to be here again.
Today, we're talking about another topic near and dear to all of us, which is all about inclusivity, the value and the visibility of the adults and amateur dancers. So let's get into it right away. So what does the word amateur mean to you? Like, how do you start to define what that word means? How do you perceive your value as a dancer or as a company? I'd be really curious to kind of kick off what that word connotes for you and what that feels like for you.
I mean, one thing that I really value about the idea of the amateur dancer is how we're really doing it so much out of love, right? Because this isn't something that we're getting paid for. We're often working other jobs and have many other things that we're juggling. And so we are dancing because we love it so much. We've dedicated so much time to it beyond our professional endeavors. And that's something that I really appreciate about the Leigh Purtill Ballet Company is that when we all come together, we see how much we love ballet. And I think it's great too, because as an amateur dancer, I'm always thinking about process over product. Really, it's not about perfection. It's about embracing the journey of learning, embracing the love for dance. And that to me is really, really exciting, not having to think so much about, am I being perfect or not? Am I fulfilling, this particular very narrow mold that often gets imposed onto the professional ballet world, and just focusing on the journey, the process, connecting with like-minded people who really love dance and who, are taking time beyond professional commitments to embrace that love together.
I love that. And I would add to that we have a association of the word amateur with like less than, right? We think, well, if you were doing it, you'd be professional. And that's not true for a number of reasons, the ones that Ashley just outlined. But I do feel like the dancers who are in these amateur organizations, amateur companies, are doing it because of a choice that they're making. And I think that that's not necessarily, when you look at like children who perform, well, it's not really a choice that they're making to spend their time doing this versus, working extra hours or something. And then when you have professionals, their choice in some ways, it's not, that's their career path. So a lot of the things they do are not necessarily choices for themselves that they're doing to make themselves happy, and I do think that that a lot of what comes along with that is that you're choosing a community, you're choosing a group. It's not just coming in and, doing your thing and leaving. And even if you do choose to do it that way, you still are adding something to the group,
Yeah, it's so interesting with the people who are professionals. There is love and there is choice, but it's a different type of love and a different type of choice. And the same way that you can do work that you love, but you are doing it for sort of a different reason, or it's like the motives behind it. And, as Ashley mentioned, the needs are different. The needs are for pleasing somebody else, or for making perfection, or for being a part of this product that is creating economic value for this person who you work for, right? So there's like a different type of a relationship there, whereas it's almost like the power dynamic changes when you're in an amateur company or when you're in a company of people who are there for different reasons. It's kind of an interesting dynamic. And it's not to say that pros don't love their work or that they don't choose to continue being there, right? But there's just like a different, it's different. I'm curious, Kelsey, or Jessica, to hear from you on that too. Like what is that feeling for you as an amateur? With amateur productions?
I think there's definitely a stigma around the word amateur. It comes with a degree of, oh, it's not as serious for this person, or you don't want excellence. And I think it's possible to want excellence and also be an amateur at something. I think that's totally what we've seen in Facet with a lot of our dancers, their commitment and that level of showing up. Doesn't necessarily match that stereotype that we have. I think I'd like to echo, what Ashley and Leigh already said. There's a degree of autonomy with being an amateur. You don't have a director imposing their beliefs about what your dancing should look like, what your body should look like. There's not the same level of control there. And so I think it allows a lot more freedom from the dancers. And you can kind of see that reflected in the art. I think the audience really resonates more with that, for sure. But yeah, there's a lot of autonomy with it, which is a benefit. And then there's a level of dedication. Yeah, like we were saying, just being there when you don't get paid for it. It's, it's for the love of it. It's for the passion, for the dedication of it all. Getting to participate in the art form and share that story versus, getting a paycheck or reaching a certain level or a rank. Of course, you might want to be able to perform a certain role or to do a certain step a certain way, but ultimately it's your choice. And I think that's really empowering personally as an amateur dancer.
Yeah, it's interesting when you posed this question both before and then today. It just struck me how much I don't associate the word amateur with anything I do. Like that word just wasn't in my brain. It's just like, I just think of us as dancers and producers and choreographers. And I really sat with that. I was like, why don't I attach amateur to it? Is it just because I wasn't thinking about it? Or is there some value here that I am choosing to not attach amateur to it? And I think it's because amateur has so much societal context and weight behind. It's almost like the word professional, and why we chose to not label ourselves as a company, because we feel like that had too much weight in what we didn't want to be. Okay. And I think that's why I don't attach amateur to what I do, even though I am by facts an amateur dancer and an amateur director, all the things. But in my head, it's like, well, that doesn't fit, because that doesn't actually encompass what these adult dancers actually are in the art and connections they're creating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a big part of why I posed the question in the first place, is because it has so much involved with it. And yet, kind of defining who we are and the place that we have and that what we can offer is such an interesting question, because you're like, just being adults doesn't exactly make sense, because the professionals are also adults, right? They're, for the most part, adults. They're over 18, maybe they're 17, but like they're adult dancers too, technically, by facts, they're adult dancers. And so it's like, what is like, it's just an interesting topic, and gets so many wheels turning on like what, getting right to the heart of the conversation of like, what is your value? What are we doing? What are we providing? Who are we? Like, where do we want to be in all of this? Who do we want to be? I feel like it really, really just like needles all of us right to the heart of what we're trying to do.
Well, if you were to look at a sport as a, because that's where that comparison comes from, is that like, okay, you have baseball teams, right? We know professional baseball teams, right? But then there's tons of people out there who play baseball and they're serious, or there's, it's softball or baseball or whatever it is, a ball club. But we don't label them amateurs. We just, right? I mean, when I think about it, my brother as an adult has played, and whether he's as a golfer or as a basketball player, and they're very well organized. It's not just like a pickup game, but they don't define themselves as amateurs, and yet we seem to make this distinction in the arts, and it, or even like when you think about, look at the arts themselves, like beyond ballet or beyond dance, it's like an artist who creates a painting, because they haven't sold. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of artists. I know that they said, did Picasso or somebody famous never sold a painting in their life, but you would never call them amateur, right? They're a painter. So anyway, it just occurred to me, like, why do we have to make that? Why do we need to make that distinction? Why is the distinction whether somebody's paid or not?
Mm-hmm. Right. That's such an interesting comparison. Like you might be in a, like in a rec league or like a recreational league. They might use that word to define the difference of it. But they're still, like you said, extremely serious. Like they'll, take it super, super seriously, practice, train, like as much as, we take our art seriously as well. I think that's a, a really great point. And like you all said, I mean, the words that I jotted down just from listening to you all in that intro question was the words that kept coming up that you all kept saying was choice, love, autonomy, and freedom. Like those were the defining, and commitment. I think those were like the defining words that kept coming up as you were using it. And so it's like those words are so different from the connotation of what we think of as like either amateur or even adult dancer kind of has a connotation within the ballet world too. Like adult dancer kind of has its own thing. So like none of those words that we all kicked it off with describe either of those connotations.
Yeah, I used to teach at an art school, at a visual art school. My first position in my professional life was teaching writing and literature at an art school. And actually, really interesting, I was thinking as you were talking, Leigh, there was such a stigmatization that kind of echoes what we've been talking about, the stigmatization of the amateur dancer around the self-educated artist versus the artist who had gone to a visual art school. And it made me think about privilege, which I think ties into this question of inclusivity and the amateur dancer, because it's an immense privilege to be able to go to art school, right? It's expensive. And there's this looking down on folks who might not have had the opportunity to go to art school and are self-educated. And I think we have to talk about that when it comes to dance too, right? Dance lessons are very, very expensive, and not everyone has the opportunity as a child to be able to go through really rigorous professional level or pre-professional level dance training because of the cost, not only of lessons, but like of point shoes, if we're talking about ballet, of like other material, of being able to like travel to different dance festivals. That costs a lot of money too. And so that's another way that I see the hierarchy of like who gets deemed as a valuable and as a well-respected and as a serious dancer, how that has to be challenged too, because we can't not talk about privilege and how privilege is entangled in who gets access to dance in a way that also enables them to go through what we would recognize in like the mainstream dance world as pre-professional serious training from a very young age, which is often what's linked to that trajectory of becoming a quote unquote serious dancer. And of course, we know that adult dancers, are very serious too. We love our craft. And often adult dancers are coming to dance classes after not having the ability to pursue that as a child too.
Yeah, there's a lot there, actually, that I feel like just opened up a lot. I see a lot of nodding, like that one really hit a lot of us, especially, being having an unconventional path into ballet myself. The amount of flack I've taken over the years for having an unconventional journey of like learning on the job and learning, in the trenches and seeking out unusual ways of training. It's just like, I would have loved to have a 10-year pre-professional track program, right? But like in lieu of being able to have that, how do you gain that, not only the credentials for lack of better word there of what you need to have, but also the skills and also the doors opening and everything like that. And then like you said, being labeled in this hierarchy of being valuable or serious or having something to offer to the world. That's such a big part to unpack.
There are a lot of gatekeepers, and Ashley, pointed to just a few. But they're, like you said, like if you took an unconventional path to but you want to reach the same goal. And you're going to meet all these other people along the way who also are going to take an unconventional path, and they need you to be able to say, that's okay. You can still do what you want. You can still get to where you want to be. Because we do see a lot of gatekeepers who say, nope, this is the only way if you want to do it. And that's enough in many cases to stop people. You have to be really committed and really determined to say, no, I don't care what you think. I'm going to do this anyway. Because there are a lot of people who've kept it, as Ashley has intimated, the privilege of, and keeping it non-diverse, keeping it, looking the same way year after year after year. So yeah, but I love that people come to this in a non-traditional way, because they're bringing to it all the other experiences that they have in their life. They're not a 14-year-old who's only been taught Vaganova for however many years and can't, doesn't know how to do a frappe in a different way. It's like there's all the things that you bring to performance, to even the classroom, and how you understand dance and how you understand creativity and expression.
The thing I was thinking about the most is how much privilege hurts all of us from like all the different angles, that I often find myself interacting with the dance world and getting very frustrated because I can so clearly see all the things they're missing because of working with adult dancers, because I see the richness of the people that they are creating barriers for letting in. And that's not just adult dancers. That's the rec dancer who's now at a pre-professional school but didn't have the first 10 years of their life at the pre-professional school. And they're not valuing this dancer because of their access to training, or in how places make their casting decisions, or taking a teenage class versus an adult class and the difference in what is offered to the two groups. And I often just find myself very frustrated. And even when you try to communicate that to people, they don't get it. And it's often because in the ballet world in particular, because that's the context we're talking in, although I think this has broader implications, when you're in that echo chamber of privilege and power, you don't have access to seeing what you're missing. And it's very hard in that echo chamber to see the harm you're causing. And I don't know how you overcome that in a lot of ways, but I do know that having all the things that we've created, like that's part of the solution. That's part of the change, because it's part of those organizations and the people in privilege seeing like, oh, something different does exist out there, and hoping that helps people to step back and do their own self-reflection, to say, where are my privileges? Where are my biases? How am I unintentionally, but still causing harm to people that I need to take accountability for and do the work to learn and change so I don't keep perpetuating this harm?
I was thinking a little bit about the adult class that I teach. Actually, last night we were rehearsing for a spring showcase, and they will be featured with, the kids in the school, etc. And the difference that I saw between like their behavior when they got to the theater for this particular showcase versus like a facet performance was so fascinating to me because you could tell they were like a little bit unsure, like, do we belong here? Is it okay? Like, we're used to our cozy little studio on Wednesday nights, right? But, just that little bit of encouragement, like, hey, you belong here. Get out there. Here's what we're going to do. And they were just so ready to take the stage after that. It was really cool to see the change and to feel like, oh, maybe I'm helping, shift this culture a little bit here. Because, I was just thinking back to like Garden of Dreams, like everyone got to the theater and we were just like running around, throwing our stuff down, dancing around on the stage, right? It's just a different environment. And whether it's intentional or not, a lot of dance organizations in particular come with that heavy environment for the adult recreational dancer where it's like, oh, is this okay for me to be here? Like so many beginners I have in my class that start out, it's almost like they they want to apologize for being there or asking questions. And it's so neat as a teacher to get to, say, hey, this is okay. You deserve to take up space. Let's learn, let's have fun, let's explore, let's play. And then they, really blossom in that environment. But I think it is unfortunate that the dance world has that kind of connotation with it. But the more of us that are out there, the more it's going to change. I'm hopeful about that.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that about theater. Those of us, or speaking of this group, we've been on stage so many times. You've been in the theater, you know the drill, and a lot of it, you're like, well, did you read that somewhere? Did somebody teach you? It's like, no, you just kind of absorb it, and that I think is the difference between what we were trying to do and what you might have other organizations trying to do, is like to prevent that knowledge from being spread. I mean, that knowledge is very powerful, and it gives them a lot of confidence. It gives people, an equal footing for a lot of things. And by not allowing people to, by not giving that information to people and not encouraging them to spread it to others, it just, it creates another barrier. But theaters are something that you just sort of absorb that stuff, as you go. I don't remember being taught,
Like culture, you just absorb it.
Yeah, you do. One of the things that we do is, I think you know this, Julie, because we did our makeup workshop with you, is each year we put out we have to our dance company, and I'm sure you've seen this, Ashley, is like the makeup guide, like all the things that you need to have, make sure you have all this. It's like, this is your kit, and you can just like check off to make sure. But for a lot of people, that's new information. What do you mean I have to wear double? I have really nice eyelashes, I'll wear some mascara. It's like, no, we need you to wear like double, it's just like super like little things like that. Or like, what do you wear underneath your leotard? You have to wear something else underneath my leotard. It's just like little things like that. But that kind of knowledge, as simple as it is empowering, and is then needs to, goes on to the next generation. And
Yeah, and I guess as we think about the idea of performing, kind of takes us into the next talking point that we wanted to get into, which is really the idea that, especially in ballet, I think there's this idea, I'm not actually sure if it's true, that it's actually true, but the idea that only a virtuoso performance is worth watching in ballet, that only the best of the best are worth looking at, or like only the whatever it is, the youngest, thinnest, most technically sound, highest legs, most pirouettes. Like there's just this kind of idea, and I think maybe just ballet has a sort of perfection, like an idea of perfection built into it. And so therefore, you're thinking about how do you navigate sharing your work publicly in this world of perfectionism within ballet? Like where, how do we challenge this idea that only virtuoso performances are worth looking at? Are they? I guess, are they is the question. What do audiences actually care about? I guess that's sort of like the crux of this question, is like, what do people actually want to see? And maybe there's a few audiences, the ballet critics, and then the unwashed masses, as they might call us. But like, what is it? What is this?
Well, I think you're actually talking. There are three audiences now. There used to be the critics, and then just the regular folks who go, right? And the regular folks who go are usually happy to be in the theater, happy to see a show, whether they know the people or not, or it's just, they don't necessarily know the difference between a tendu and a dégagé. I mean, it's not like those technical things. They just enjoy it, And then, of course, the critics, which I never really understood a lot of the critical reviews anyway. But then there's this now, these days, we have this social media influencer group of people, and we see it on any video that is ever posted, professional, amateur, child, adult, doesn't matter. There are comments. People have things to say. And I think that muddies up everything. Because I think that it's almost like a little bit of knowledge is not enough. You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm probably not saying that very well, but it's like, you have people saying things or making judgments that they, I mean, everybody's got their opinion, but I feel like a lot of judgments that are made about, well, that wasn't perfect. This wasn't perfect. It's like loses the context of, so now every performance is looked at as little pieces because those are the little pieces that are posted, as opposed to what's the context of the story, what's the context of the show, what are the relationships between these characters as their character development. You don't see character development in a 30-second TikTok video.
Interesting. It's almost like that third audience that you mentioned has its own set of goals, right? It is the audience that is seeking like a little box to put everybody in that has to be perfect. And you mess this up here and you mess that up here. And, you're going to injure yourself if you keep doing it like that. And all of these things that people, toss at you on the internet. That's like that's an audience that's maybe those people exist in the actual theater, but they probably are too busy commenting to be in the theater. They're probably not the same people. They're probably not the same people who are in the theater. At least that's my estimation from interaction with these folks.
Yeah. I think we all have, and it's so disappointing. It's so disappointing. I swear I always tell myself don't read the comments, but I do, and it's like, yeah. But I do think that it's changed an awful lot in the past 15 years or so. Where when I put my choreography out there for people to enjoy, it's not that I don't want people to watch it online. I do, of course, but I want them to watch it in context, which they don't necessarily get. I don't need a critical review. I want people to enjoy it. Ballet is for everyone, right? I don't want it just for these critics. But I feel like as much as I don't want in other words, yes, please share my videos. That's great. But I don't want my dancers or their work to be demeaned because somebody has not taken the time to look at what the whole picture is and they've just pulled out a little bit here or there. So,
right, the soundbite effect where you get taken out of context and it's just not at all it.
I was just thinking about, the concept of like an armchair critic and how so many people are just afraid to put themselves out there, so many dancers because of that. And I was just wondering like what we all feel like we could do to kind of mitigate some of that, or is that something that is just going to be a part of it, putting yourself out there. There's always going to be those comments, those criticisms. Because I'm just, we're really young with Facet. And so I'm always thinking of like, what's the best way? And, Kelsey and I have talked about like, we really need to work on the marketing side of things, but it's like, what's the best way to put it out there to where we're reaching that audience? And receiving the feedback that we want to, or maybe a better way to say that is that the people that will enjoy it will be watching it. It's so hard, right? It's unpredictable with social media algorithms and all of that.
I think there's always going to be those comments and critiques that come out of the woodworking. I mean, every person who you look at, like any video you look at, and like since I've been out there on the internet and gotten wide range of both amazing and awful like things that have happened on the internet, right? The full gamut, some of the most amazing things I've ever seen people do and say and come together, and then also the most awful things that I've ever seen people say and do, and like it's kind of both. But when you look at other people, like even people doing like great, good, beautiful things, you get haters in the comments. Like you always would, no matter what you do, have that. And I don't know if we can mitigate those people, because I think that's just sort of a fact of life, not even in dance, like everywhere you're giving the whole range of gamut. If you are putting yourself out there, I think that's going to be a part of it. But I feel like the way to mitigate it is for people to see that it is, let me see if I can put this. This is where I've come to see that it is not about you, that every single person gets it. It is just about the fact that you have put yourself out there, that you're receiving this type of feedback, and to not see that it means anything about you personally. Like they might be saying, oh, you're whatever rude thing that they're going to say about you. And then you're like, well, they would have said this to literally anybody who was put in front of them. This is not about me personally. It means nothing about me. It means nothing about my success. It means nothing about my ability to keep going. It just means that this person got my particular video put in front of them, and they were going to say this to any similar video that got put in front of them. Like that type of negativity that doesn't really mean anything to them. That's kind of where I've landed on it, just by seeing that it literally happens to everybody, no matter what they're saying, no matter how good or bad or whatever. It's like universal. Therefore, it is not about you, and you should just keep doing what you're doing and let them do what they're doing. That's where I've come to anyways. Maybe, I mean, we all have to come to our own thing. So maybe that's not the right way for everybody, but that's where I've come to.
No, I agree. And when I look at the stuff that you put out, and I feel like you do have, whether internally you feel differently, externally, the way you present yourself is that, you know what, I'm out here doing this and that's what I'm doing. What are you doing? And I think that I do think that comes across with what you're doing. And I think that that's personally, I think that's a great role model, for anybody. I do wonder what the impact, because when you think about critical reviews, for instance, of course, let's look at, like the New York City Ballet, and they have a critical review in the New York Times. And that is like, oh my gosh, how is that going to affect our audience? People aren't going to want to come see this new thing because they read this terrible review. And if there are no reviewers like that, people are going to look to influencers. They're going to look to the online, people who have something to say. Is that going to have the same impact on our work and people reviewing it, like coming to see the shows, now that we don't have that? Because there's a lot of dance critics that are gone, we don't have a lot of them. So looking to be, and we all do that, like we have a show coming up in July, as I'm sure you've got a show coming up soon, and you're talking about marketing. You're like, all right, well, we got to get the word out so that people come see us. And what do we do to do that? Well, you usually give them a little taste of what it is. And it's like, what do you give so that they want to come and they don't, somebody doesn't pick it apart. So now are they replacing, I guess my question is, are those people replacing the traditional reviewer now that they're more accessible too?
Yeah, I feel like the notes that I was kind of jotting down move us away from what you were just talking about, Leigh. So for that, I apologize, and maybe we can come back to it, because it is really important that balancing of, not caring about what the critics say, because we're not dancing for them ultimately, but then at the same time, we do need people to be filling the seats for our shows to be made possible, because it costs a lot to put those shows on. So finding that balance of not worrying about critics, because ultimately we don't care. It's not them we're trying to impress, but also making sure that we're building an audience. Yeah, I don't have a great answer. And a lot of my perspective at this point is coming from being a remote ballet company member. So I haven't performed ballet on a traditional stage in front of a live audience in a very long time. A lot of what I'm doing is in like the little social media box or like the Zoom screen. That's generally how I'm dancing these days. And so I was thinking, as folks were talking about that and about the concerns with critics on social media, when we post our videos on Instagram, loving dance and sharing that journey, what has been really important to me is finding my people. So when I was training in person, I have a chronic injury. I injured my hip really seriously. And I was performing in the Nutcracker one year, and the artistic director for the company that was putting on the show at the time, she wanted me to do one dance, but the choreographer didn't want me to do it because he wanted someone who could do the splits. And I couldn't do the splits. I had this hip injury. It just wasn't going to be possible. So he kicked me out of the dance. And that's something that, it influenced me for a long time in terms of thinking like, am I good enough? Should I be posting my content on social media? Because like, yeah, I'm not that person who's going to have my like high extensions or whatnot. And when I opened my Instagram account, what was really important to me was finding my people. So my people are not the people who are worrying about if my leg is like up by my ear, right? It's people who are also, you know, coming together to learn and love dance as adult ballet dancers. And there's, I think what's really exciting is there's like ever growing visibility around people who are doing what it is that we're all doing. I will admit I'd followed you, Julie. I'd followed Broche for a long time from a distance when I was living in Toronto. And then when COVID happened and classes went online, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a studio that I want to be part of, so I can finally take classes here. So I did, and that's how I found out about Leigh Purtill Ballet Company was, you know, through connecting with people who were following Broche on social media. They were also following Leigh Purtill, and that's how I auditioned for the company. And so, you know, finding my people has been really important. So then the critics in that way don't matter because they're not my people. They're not the people that I'm looking for. And I was thinking too, Leigh, when you first started talking about social media and how people like armchair, Jessica, you were talking about armchair critics too. I was thinking about how, you know, a couple of weeks ago, I was watching Anna Pavlova, Dying Swan, one of my favorite pieces. And if we're going to talk about people who are seen as virtuoso performers, I mean, Anna Pavlova is considered that, but when she was dancing, the technique of ballet was like very different. It's transformed, right? And expectations around it have transformed. So I was noticing people were saying of Dying Swan, oh, she's not very good. Like her technique's not very good. This, that, like her legs are not here. She's not doing these big tricks. I'm not joking. You can find these comments. And to me, I'm like, okay, so yeah, that kind of gets at the heart of what you were talking about too, Julie, where like there's always going to be these critics, people who often have no clue what they're talking about. But it also reminded me of that question you asked us, what do people actually want to see? And it's true that Anna Pavlova dances differently than a principal ballet dancer today. But the reason why I love watching Dying Swan is not because she's doing 32 fouette turns. Like that's not what interests me. What interests me is the heart of the dance. And I am always moved to tears when I see her dance. She doesn't have to do 32 fouette turns. It's the fact that she embodies the Dying Swan. And that's something that I see so much in the ballets that, you know, we do in Leigh Purtill Ballet Company. There's such storytelling, and Leigh spends so much time with us, getting us into character and moving through understanding the story. And then that brings heart, right? So we all bring heart to the dance, and that's what I want to see. That's what draws me to want to watch dance, is seeing the heart in it. And adult ballet dancers are so invested. You can see the heart anytime they dance.
The question that kept coming to my mind, and I asked this of myself a lot through a production process, is how do I let the audience be a participant in the art without the audience becoming the reason for the art? Because oftentimes when I allow the audience to become the reason I'm creating something on my dancers, that's when it's not good, because it's not for the audience. The audience is actually an active participant in the art, not the reason for the art. And so when I can keep that straight, that makes it more like a community process. It makes it about connection instead of perfection. And it also allows the dancer to play like a storytelling, a choreographic role in it. Like, sure, I am the choreographer, but I also see the dancer as a co-choreographer because we're working with their body. How do you do this move? How do you express this from an artistic point of view? What I imagine in my head is never what comes out on this dancer. Like, no matter how close I am, no matter how well I know this dancer, it's always different. And so it's like that co-creation process matters a lot, but so does that co-creation process with the audience in live art. Like, that's a part of the experience that I can't just take the audience out of it. Sometimes I wish I could, because I don't love all audiences. They can be critical. They might be really silent. You know, we have good audiences and bad audiences. I can't just take them out of the equation, but I also can't let them dictate the whole equation. because they are not the 100% stakeholders. There's other people that hold more, but they have to hold some of the stake for live art audiences.
Yeah, that's so interesting to think about who is it for? Like who is it for? I think we're thinking about what do people want to see. It's also what do you want to make? I guess that's the question you're asking too, Kelsey. It's like what do you want to make? And then, how do you want the dancers to feel? And what's the holistic aspect of it? Not only just what do people want to see, because in a sense, people will pay to go to the theater to see what they want to see, but also they may not even know yet what they want to experience, and they might experience something completely unique and surprising that ends up touching them in a way that is very surprising because the choreographer created something true to themselves, or the dancer shared their own story. So that kind of flips the conversation on its head in a very interesting way.
That's interesting listening to you, Kelsey. Because I totally agree with what you're saying. It's like you have to let the audience in on it. When I'm working with the dancers, especially the ones who, well, all of my dancers, whether it's remote or the in-person dancers, I find that with adult dancers, they tend to this is the one thing that is different if you haven't grown up with performance, is that they tend to make things very small. And so I'm always asking them to think about the audience. We can be in the studio and it's a ballet class. It's just working on technique. And I want them to express themselves bigger, be out there. And so I always give them my father as a guide. I say, imagine my dad who likes to sit in the back because it's easy for him to get up and out. And he's always going to look at the program and go during an intermission and go, what was that? What was that? So you need to project to John Purtill in the back and say, is John Purtill going to understand this without looking at his program? And it's just that usually I want them to, so I do want them to acknowledge the audience. I want them to make, like you say, make them a part of it, be a part of it. But I do feel like there is that performance aspect that allows the dancers to step outside themselves and embody characters that they don't. I mean, we have really unusual characters, right, Ashley? We have some really unusual characters. And it's like, okay, so I want you to be this. You're going to be a mermaid. You're going to be an illustrated woman. You're going to painted, whatever the characters are. There's really a lot of unusual ones. It's like, and it's not always easy to get people to do that, especially as adults. So you kind of have to ask them to project a little bit more. So I do. So I agree and I don't agree. So I see what you're saying and I see it in a different way.
Yeah, I really like that. I think that's the reason why whenever I lead warm-up, which is most of the time, I guess, so far, one of the things we always include in my warm-ups is just walking across stage. And I give them a character and emotion that they have to present as they're walking across the stage, because adults need time to play and learn how to take up space and feel comfortable. There's always a silly one, like, give me the saddest walk or give me the most defeated walk you can. And they go all out and I'm like, okay, great. Now we're gonna go the other way. Give me the most confident walk. And they usually struggle with that one more, but because they went the extreme of the easier one, they then suddenly can flip it and bring the silliness to be like, oh, I can take up this space and it doesn't have to hold the weight that it might hold in my day-to-day life to take up space. Like on stage, this is the place where I'm free to take up as much space as I want and no one is going to judge me for it. And I think that's what audiences read. And that's sort of the connection between the performer and the audience, is how is the performer taking up space and inviting the conversation with the audience. And it's a very interesting thing to watch adults progress in that, because it's not, some people just have it and then some people can flip it really quickly. And then some people take a long time to get comfortable enough to even, not stand in the back the whole time or tell me that they need to be in the back of every dance. Because I have dancers that do that. They're like, do not put me anywhere but the back. And I'll respect that for a little bit. And then we have a talk and we're like, okay, I'm not going to put, you can be in the back most of the dance, but you're going to have a moment where you're in the front. I'll still let you have someone you can watch, but you're not going to stay in the back corner anymore. And to watch the difference of people's processes is really beautiful, because I think that's what creates a lot of inclusivity for the audience, because the audience gets to see the people at the different parts in the process all on stage at once. And I think that's why, if we go back to the word amateur, like why amateur art matters so much, why art at every level matters, is because your audience is not professionals. The people watching the art are not the top people. Okay, maybe you have one in the audience if you're lucky. Not in Arkansas. We don't have any professionals here, really. But you want the art to be relatable. You want people to be able to see themselves in it and really immerse themselves in the storytelling, even if that's just from an emotion level. The more relatable your performers are on stage, the more depth and ripples that it has for the audience beyond the stage.
Right. Like in the way that you go see like a circus show or like a Cirque du Soleil, you go there and you're just like, wow, I didn't know a body could do that. But you don't necessarily think that you're about to take up contortion. Like it doesn't really inspire you personally. Like maybe someone took up silks from watching it, like, like beginner silks. But like for the most part, you go there, and for me, when I watched it, I was like, wow, that was so cool. I had no clue people could do that. And then that is like, that's the end of it. But when you see with someone doing something that, they look more around your level or more around what you think would be reasonable to do, you're like, oh, well, that person can do it. Like I might, I could probably do that. They're about my age. I could probably try that. Right. Like it has a different impact, this virtuoso / cool / wow / like circus effect versus like something like you said, Kelsey, which is like relatable and has a ripple effect on somebody's life. It's a very different purpose and a very different outcome.
And I find that when an audience sees, especially adult women, take up space on stage, that ripples into so many more adult women being able to take up space in their day-to-day lives. That is so powerful. And like it honestly, when I think about it and like watch my dancers and even audience members do it, it almost always gives me chills. So it's like, wow, this is so healing. And not just healing for the one dancer, it's like healing for the community.
I'll just say that inclusivity and diversity are really just strengths in the end, because the more diverse your cast, like in a show is, the more people that are able to be included, the more audience members can see themselves in it and the more relatability it has. And I think, Kelsey, you were talking about that audience relationship. That's something that everyone can benefit from. And that's really what art is about, is the mutual betterment, the mutual healing. I like the word healing a lot. That everyone gets to participate equally and everyone gets to see themselves, whatever that means. It could be in a character. It could be, oh, this person has this body feature that I do, and they're out there dancing. That's so cool. Just little things like that, I think, can make a huge difference.
There's such a big thing about seeing adult women take up space that I want to dig into. I see it struck a chord with you all here too. And for the most part, I mean, I do work with some men. Of course, I wish I worked with more men, and I hope that'll continue changing too. But for the most part, I work with almost exclusively women. For the most part, middle age 35 to 60. That's kind of I think 35. I was like the bottom end of all of that, right? But like basically this age, right? You've kind of gotten your life together. You're not just out of college, but you really are kind of established and you're ready for the next thing all the way through until like the, early empty nest phase. And this group of women is very fearful of their own body, of their own space, of their own voice, of their own emotions, of their own physical sensations. And I don't, it's very interesting to watch people come out of their shell, to watch them. And some people take years of weekly artistry classes and weekly practice to start to even want to move their head, or even to start to want to breathe while they're dancing, or even to start want to do little things that would visibly express a feeling or an emotion. And I'm curious, I'm just curious to hear from you guys. I would love to just chat about this a little bit and hear about, how we can help women take up more space. Why are we like this? Like how do we encourage each other? And, I think a big part of it is seeing each other in these roles, taking up space. But I would just love to hear from you all about this topic, because it means a lot to me and it really impacts my work on a daily basis. So I would love to hear from you about what it means to you.
Well, I think it's especially like for me, just thinking about being a woman of color, I think it's especially something that resonates because of how much racism there has been, and misogyny that there has been in the ballet world. And I know we're going to talk in another episode about like classical ballet performances, and I have a lot to say with regards to that. But I would just put out there that I think it can be especially difficult for those of us who are women of color, to, find ourselves in ballet spaces because there has been so much racism in training, in access, in the storytelling that gets told through classical ballet. And it that makes it hard. In addition to the fact that, like, as women of color, we're always navigating racism and misogyny in our day-to-day lives. And then, of course, there's the intersections too, then, of like body type. I am a woman of color who's heavier, right? Chubby. And so, like, that can be another thing where it's like, well, it's hard for me to take up space in my body. One, as someone who's racialized. Two, as a woman. Three, as someone who's been told my body isn't the quote unquote ideal ballet type. So all of these things can impact the space that we take up. And yeah, I'm just appreciative for spaces like the Leigh Purtill Ballet Company and Broche Ballet for being spaces where inclusivity, where ballet is for everyone, is like really, really believed. And I never have to feel like I'm taking up space that I shouldn't. And where there is an understanding of why it can be hard for some of us who are coming into the classroom to take up space, or some of the micro and macro aggressions we faced in previous dance spaces that we carry with us and have to like constantly kind of unlearn, and are constantly looking out for in other dance spaces too.
Yeah, Ashley, I agree with all of that, and I 100%, as you know, but I do, and where I came from originally, I went to a women's college, and my focus, I've had, I'm older than all of you, experienced a slightly different generational impact on, experiencing, and it scares me and angers me that you all, in this generation and even younger, are going through the same, discrimination and like everything that we went through. That's a completely different podcast. But so what I do is, like, I do have men in my company, and which is great. And I try to not put them in the roles. I try to put people in roles that are not traditional. So I don't have princes rescuing princesses, and so I start, like Ashley was mentioning, start with the storytelling. So in my stories, the women are always, they're the villains, they're the heroes, they're the love interests, they're the pursuers. So I start with the story, and then and I think that really helps people. It helps the women, and it also helps the men that we do in the company. They assume that it's like, well, not necessarily just because we have a role that's traditionally played by a man, who says that's going to be the case now. To do something like, so they don't automatically assume they're going to get a particular role. But it also, like, even before I had the company, when, as you say, Julie, most of the time you're going to have mostly women in your productions. But even so, even when I did have men, like I did Coppelia, I did some traditional ballets, and it's like I was in charge of certain roles or certain parts of the storytelling. Like, yeah, no, we're not going to do it that way. We're not going to have the king be the powerful one. We're going to have this character. This character is going to be, it's going to be a woman, or woman presenting. It's like, it's, why does it always have to be that way? So that I just start right away with the story, so that everybody is like understands that it's not like I want women to be. I'm not going to make any apologies for that. I want women to be the focus in a more impactful way than being just acted upon. So anyway, that was long, but as soon as you start, that's like my, I try to, that's my focus. So I do like.
Jessica, did you want to hop in on this one?
Yes, I have so many thoughts. My adult ballet class is all women. And has been for years. And I just see the harmful effects of things like sexism, racism, all these isms, right, that happen, and how we're just told to be small by society, whatever that definition is, and so many different facets of our life. And that's something I've really tried to, as a teacher, to create a culture where it's okay to take up space, but also being patient with my students and letting them express as they're ready, not pushing them too hard. But what I've found is through the years, the other dancers have really just helped each other, because we've created this community of women supporting women, and they see, oh, well, she can do that. I can do that too. And they kind of hold each other accountable. It's really cool. Just a small anecdote. I was talking to one of my dancers after class the other night, and she was like, you know what? I'm really proud that, another dancer's name, she asked a question tonight. And that was the first time she ever asked a question. And I'm just so proud of her. And I was like, what a lovely sentiment. I love that you noticed that. And I love that, like, we're all encouraging each other here. That just really made me happy. And I think so often you're not encouraged to show up authentically, right? You've got to put on the mom hat if you're a mother. You've got to put on your career woman hat for your job, and all these different fragments of ourselves. And I think just creating a space like a ballet class where you just get to be and experience your body and not have to project something is very powerful. And I think that's really a lot of the beauty in what we do, that healing aspect that we were talking about earlier. It's definitely a practice. I like to think of it that way. There's days where I feel super confident going into class, and I'm like, yeah, I'm like just going to wear the tights and the leotard or whatever it is. And then there's other days where I'm like, why do I even want to move? Like, I just don't feel good, whatever it is. But I always feel better leaving ballet class. And I think that's something that I want to continue on with. Like when running Facet, I always want the dancers to leave empowered from rehearsals and performances, and even just the classes I teach, is to create this culture of like women supporting women, and practicing just being authentic together. I think that's really valuable.
So my day job is I'm a mental health therapist, and so I work with a lot of people on this topic. Like, honestly, if you had to say, like, the one thing I truly do in my work is build secure attachments and let people take up space. And that's really where change comes from in therapy. And that's also where I found growth happens in dancers. Like, sure, I'm teaching them tendus and pliés and choreography, and like, how do you manage yourself on stage? How do you project? How do you remember choreography? How do you not run into people? But really, the deeper work I'm doing is how do you create safety to connect to your body that then allows you to express outward? And like, that is the actual work I'm doing. It just takes the form of ballet and dance. And I think that's where like taking up space happens. It's not the tendus that allow people to take up space. The tendu is just the pencil. It's the instrument that helps people take up space. But the deeper work that I think dance does in particular is demands us to be embodied. I mean, you can't dance without being a percentage embodied, even if you're like, I came to dance very traumatized and very dissociated and disconnected from my body. And that's why I leaned into dance, is because it was the one place where I could connect. And I had this awareness that I was like, the disconnection from my body is creating this tension for me. It's creating this distress. And dance was the vehicle where I could learn to connect with. And I think all people that come to dance, but especially people that come as adults to dance, that's primarily what they're looking for. That's what they love about dance, is I get to be fully present and connected to myself and expressing who I am in this way that feels fun. It feels joyful. It's naturally regulating from a nervous system perspective. Like, moving is actually good for us. It helps us feel better, releases good hormones, all those things. But that the underlying piece of really what putting out art into the world is doing is helping people learn that they matter and helping people learn that it's safe to connect to their bodies again.
Actually, I would love listening to Kelsey talk about the mental health connection. And it was just really, it's really interesting because you were talking about being joyful and being expressive and everything. And we all here believe that that's possible through ballet, but I think that's something that's not necessarily associated with ballet, that authenticity, right? It is usually like modern dance or contemporary. Um, that's where people are authentic and their authentic selves. And somehow that doesn't translate with ballet, but we all know that that's true.
Yeah, that's such an interesting point too, that we think of ballet as serious and rigid and contemporary as free and connective. But I think all of us here have a deep love for ballet specifically and enjoy creating it through ballet, which is, one of the reasons I have like an artistry class where we just do a ballet combination, but with the focus on your presence and your fingers and your musicality and how you're expressing the movement. So we do one combination for 25 minutes and really like perfect it in the sense of artistic perfection, like making it yours, making it your own, right? And I was really adamant that it would only be ballet vocabulary because I wanted people to see that you did not have to leave ballet choreography in order to express. Like you can, obviously there's other beautiful styles out there, but like for those people who love classical ballet, I think that they often don't realize that you can actually express yourself with classical ballet. It doesn't, like Kelsey said, it's just a pencil. It doesn't matter. You can do anything with a pencil. Some people can do amazing things with pencils that I have no clue how they do with pencils. It's really unrelated to the tool and the medium. You can do classical arms and make them authentic. You can do classical turned out pas de bourrées and make them mean something to you. It's really, you don't have to leave ballet to express. I think that I've got one more point that we'll wrap up on. And I think just the last thing on, helping women take up space. I think there's such a big transformation that I see, especially with the leap between taking up space in a safe space into taking up space in a less safe feeling space, that you can take up space in a place where it's not just women empowering women. And it's not just your space, which obviously is where we learned that. That's where we learn the skills to be afraid and to be brave and to be seen making mistakes and to be seen being imperfect and to receive negative feedback and to, go through all of that. But I think that that's the huge transformation that I love seeing is when people take that and then they tell you how they showed up in their life differently after they had this experience in ballet. And I think that's huge because just being able to show up in your safe space is amazing, but the real transformation, how it ripples into your life is when you see like, no, I am me, I am comfortable in my skin. And no matter what happens in this circumstance, I am okay. And I can be myself in this difficult circumstance or in this difficult place. I think that's kind of the next level where I love seeing people break out of their shell, even in those little scarier places where they might not have a guarantee that they're going to be well received, that they would still be okay, even if it didn't go perfectly. If you have already a last topic that you want to feel, a last point that you want to be sure to make, feel free to do it. But otherwise, if you don't, what advice, what are some ways that we can all uplift and celebrate our dancers in this world of finding their value, helping them find freedom and love and being a serious, dedicated dancer? But in this way, how can we really celebrate and uplift our dancers?
I think so much of it has to do with, if you're talking from a choreographer director standpoint, is seeing the strengths that your dancers have. Sometimes they don't even see it in themselves and celebrating that and going, great, you do this step this way, and that conveys this emotion to me that I'm seeing it. Let's put it in this choreography this way. Just giving the dancers space to explore things as well. A lot of times I work with some dancers through Facet that have a history of being in the ballet world and some that do not. And the ones that, have that kind of dance background sometimes are hesitant to tell me if something doesn't feel quite right, or if they're not super confident in a step. They're, oh no, I'm gonna do it anyway. It's fine. And I'm like, if you don't like it, we can change it. What would bring you joy for this piece? And that just kind of blows their mind. And I always enjoy, with the more beginners, kind of taking them along the road of like, what feels good to you? What do you enjoy? Let's do more of that. Because I think focusing on what feels good, the reasons people are there, these positive aspects of dance, it just keeps growing and magnifying, and everyone feeds off of it, and it really can improve the energy of an overall production. And I think the audience can really tell. Yeah, the word that someone used, I think our first facet performance, someone from the audience gave us feedback that it was very heartful. And that meant the world to me. I'm like, that is what I want people to say about my dancing. That's what I want people to say about what I choreograph, about the kinds of dance environments that I'm leading, is that it's full of heart, and just exploring what that means, whether it's through a character, whether it's through, how you conduct the class that you're teaching. There's so many ways you can do it. But I think at the end of the day, it's about how you feel and how you make other people feel.
I'm going to speak from the perspective of someone who is on the student side most of the time and the dancer who's learning choreo, that side of things. And I'm going to share two stories to make kind of the 2 points that I want to. So the first is, as I said, I have a chronic hip injury. And I'm really thinking about what we were talking about earlier. Kelsey so powerfully talked about connecting with the body, and how for us, ballet is a vehicle where we can learn to connect with the body. So I received my hip injury in a ballet class. I was doing the middle splits on the bar. The teacher deemed that I wasn't far enough down. I said I was at my limit, and she physically pushed me into the bar. And so you can imagine the injury that resulted from that. Yeah, it's an experience that for a long time kind of impacted how I showed up in ballet classes, and I had a really hard time advocating for myself and for the needs of my body. And so I think, for me as a student, something that's really important in uplifting dancers is, as you help us connect with our bodies, also trust that we're listening to our bodies. We started talking, this podcast, we started talking about how amateur dancers embrace autonomy. And that's been something that's so important for me, is to learn how to embrace my autonomy and walk that or move that fine balance between connecting with my body and pushing my body while also listening to it and not pushing it sometimes. And so having a dance environment and teachers who allow me to embrace my autonomy and allow me to listen to my body and trust that I have the wisdom around my body is really important to me. And then I'd mentioned earlier, finding community. That's the other thing that I think is really important for those of us who are looking for our adult dance community. So another story, I lived in Toronto for 6 years, and I tested out a bunch of different adult ballet classes at different adult ballet studios. And I remember I thought it was really cool that I could take adult ballet classes with National Ballet of Canada, because, come on, if we're going to talk about prestigious places where I can take serious dance classes, that felt like the space. But I remember, I was going a couple times a week, and pretty shortly into going, when we were warming up before class, people started talking about their diets, what you shouldn't eat, what you should eat, what was a no-no to eat. And there was just a lot of body shaming that was being talked about in that space. And I thought, yeah, this is not my community. I'm going to choose to say no to this space, because this space doesn't fill me. It's not the kind of space that I want to lean into. And so that meant that I did have to experiment. I had to experiment with different spaces. And again, this is, embracing my autonomy and listening to my body. When my body felt like, nope, this is not a safe space for me, that would be a space I would leave until I found a community that was my community, where folks, were coming together to dance for the same reasons that I was, and cultivating safe spaces that challenged a lot of the toxicity that we all too often find in mainstream ballet. And I've been very fortunate to connect with all of you folks too, who are providing that kind of space and helping me to continue to find my community spaces where I want to say yes. So those are the two big things: embracing autonomy, connecting with the body, trusting, having teachers who trust that I'm listening to my body and know it, and then finding community.
I was thinking about this question from both sides. So myself as a teacher, how do I celebrate and uplift dancers? And then myself as a dancer, how do I do that for myself? So first, one of the things I do in my classes is, instead of them curtsying to me at the end, I don't know, that feels weird. I think it's just because I didn't grow up in ballet that it feels weird to me. I make them tell me something they did well in class. That's their checkout. So they have to come acknowledge me, but instead of saying, they usually do say thank you because it's etiquette, but I don't really care about the thank you. I care about them being able to identify, here's something I did well in the past hour and a half. And to watch dancers grow and be able to identify and verbalize that, and then how they verbalize it, is one way that I feel like I have invested in trying to celebrate and uplift dancers, because I don't want to be the person that they're getting all of their validation from. Like, I need to be validating them as a teacher, but I also need to be empowering them that the external validation is not always going to be there. And you have to have the mix of external and internal to have the motivation to keep going. And then for myself as a dancer, I think this is a question that I've been exploring for a long time, but I always like to go back to, if I'm going to ask my dancers to do something, I also need to be doing that for myself. That it's unfair and inauthentic of me to ask people to identify what they did well if I go take a class and I just tear myself apart the whole time. And so I think I've been playing with that. Like, how do I best celebrate what I'm doing well while still managing like the goals I have and the ways I do want to improve, not only as a dancer, but as a choreographer, as a leader, as a director. Like, that comes along with the territory. I'm naturally going to be hard on myself. That can be a strength, but I'm not naturally going to be celebrating myself, but that's also really needed. And so I think I'm trying in part to lead by example, to say, I'm going to do this work alongside you, because we all are doing this work our whole lives. Even when we think we've got it, we're going to hit something new. It's like, oh no, now this thing, like, I don't know what to do with this. But like, being authentic, like, I think that is something I'm very much still working on as a dancer and a choreographer and teacher, is not only being able to encourage others, but being able to encourage myself.
Listening to everybody, of course, I love hearing everything from everybody. And I'm nodding my head. I'd say the way, like, when you're thinking about empowering, especially women, but just, empowering our students, all of them, I feel like it's most, like, for me, I just acknowledge and each of them as an individual. And as Jessica, you were saying something similar. Like, when I put them in a whether it's in a class or it's on the stage, is that each of them has their own, like, just as a silly example, like our zombie ballet portion, it's like a huge group of zombies going across the stage. And the first thing I ask each of them to remember is like, well, how did each of you die? So each of them has to think of a way that they, so it's like, we're not just a zombie. I mean, you came from, and so they all come up with their own backstory of how this happened, and they bring that to the dance. So, but I don't want, like, any of us who grew up in ballet, a lot of it is like, you just told what to do, or you are shown what to do and just said, do it like this. And as adults, especially, like Ashley was saying, they come in with injuries and they may not tell you right away. Like, I know some people come in like, oh, I have this and this and this and this and all that. And sometimes they say that as armor, like, don't, and then sometimes they don't even know, and they don't want to tell me, like, oh yeah, I did this and this is going to be painful. And, so, I think just making sure that everybody is like Ashley, is that they are, not trying to do something just because they saw it on Instagram, that they are actually doing it within their bodies. Like, each body is its own, has its own limitations, and then they have limitations that can be pushed a little. And that's where and that can be whether it's character, whether it's, their person, like their stage personality, or just one of the things I love most is watching people who come from a traditional ballet background where you don't really encourage other people. And they come into my class and they see everybody else encouraged, like, oh, and you just watch them transform, and they soon become like telling other people, hey, you did that great or whatever. And it's like, because that's not something that a lot like that we grew up with, the teacher is the one who tells you when you did something right or wrong. And then, so I think that just recognizing everybody as a different, like as their own person. And I think that also will helps women too, who might not, they might not be recognized as themselves. They're like, well, they're always a mom, or they're always this or that. And it's like, no, when you're here, you're just you're Ashley, you're not all this other stuff.
Well, thank you everyone for this conversation. I just looking over at the page of things I jotted down to follow up with, I just love some of these words that kept coming out, like the autonomy, the freedom, the unconventional, the express yourself, connect, relate, like these really great words that just kept coming out of the conversation. So really, really fun to get to chat with you all and to get to hear so many different perspectives on all of these different questions, and to get to hear where you're all coming from. So thank you all for your time, your energy, your enthusiasm for being a part of this super great space. I really love the chat, and really excited to stay connected with you all. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
All right, dancers, I hope you've had a lot of fun with this 3-part series. I'll be back in your ears next week with a Just Julie episode. And until then, I wish you a very happy dancing.